Joining our conversation is Chris Krebs. He's the former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at DHS during the Trump administration. We've wanted to talk to you for a long time. Now, I hate admitting that I know this, but there are a bunch of right-wing bloggers who watch this broadcast. And for any of those little honey buns, let me just get some facts out. Was there voter fraud in 2020?
At a very, very low level.
Enough to change the outcome of the election in any state?
Absolutely not.
Was there anything with the voting machines, either by Systematic or Dominion, that flipped votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden?
Not that we saw from an intentional perspective. There were some, I think, human errors up in Antrim County, Michigan, that were caught, as would normally happen in the tabulation process, and immediately corrected. Was there any evidence presented in any of the 60, 70, 80 lawsuits that contradicts any of this? Not that I'm aware of. And a number of those cases, despite some of the claims that they were purely decided on standing, a number of those cases in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia were actually determined on the merits as well. Did you ever get any sense before Election Day that the president didn't want the election to be secure? I think that there were a number of indicators over the course of the summer that the campaign and the president and others were attempting to undermine confidence in the process. If you recall, there was a lot of work over the summer to call into question the expansion of mail-in voting and absentee ballot use due to the fact that, there was a pandemic ongoing, and we wanted to make sure that, states wanted to make sure that it was safe to vote. That was for me, the first real indicator that there were going to be some disinfo shenanigans in the 2020 election. When you watched the insurrection on live television on January 6th, as we all did, and you knew at a technical level and a policy level and a substantive level that the lie was a lie, and you'd been saying it everywhere you could say it to everyone you could tell, what did you think? How did you feel? It was pretty surreal. I, of course, can't imagine what it was like for the law enforcement officers that were there actually having to deal with the violence. But sitting back, knowing what we knew, all the building blocks, all the indicators had been in place. We had released the year before an awareness campaign called the War on Pineapple, and it was really a decomposition of what a foreign influence campaign looks like. And unfortunately, this time around, instead of it being a foreign actor, it was domestic actors that were sowing the seeds of distrust and manipulating the minds of the American people. And the last step in that campaign is taking things to the streets. And that's effectively what we saw. Ultimately, the lid popped off and we had the insurrection at the Capitol. And the acting Capitol Police Chief has warned that a joint address to Congress from President Biden would be a target. The Department of Homeland Security, in which you worked, and the FBI have issued a pretty unprecedented terror threat that holds that through the end of April, the country is at a heightened risk of domestic terrorists who believe the big lie. What more should Republicans, who remain the enablers of Donald Trump's big lie, they flocked to CPAC and they clapped and they echoed it, and they parroted it. And again, I think Donald Trump is off the stage, but there's servitude to him and their willingness to repeat this lie that led to an insurrection that remains a threat through the end of April. What is the security implication of that? Well, we've got a number of dates that are coming up that are important to the Nostradamus types of the queue following, March 4th. Or March 20th now. They're going to keep pushing the dates back of when the once and future president, the former guy, as you call him, is going to come back. And it's fiction. It's false. It's nonsense. The bigger problem here is that we have, to your point about the servitude, the followers in the GOP, that one way or the other, if this is the horse you're betting on, it's a really bad strategic decision for a couple of reasons. One of the illegal exposure of the former president, as well as just the fact that he's getting on there in age. And I'm just not sure that in 4 years he's going to be a viable candidate. Pull the Band-Aid off now we have to change course. If the GOP wants to exist in any sort of viable political party mode, then they've got to change course. They've got to do it quickly. But I think what we're seeing more than anything, what you saw at CPAC, is that the base is ultimately driving the bus.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.